Welcome back to Education Matters. Did you guess 60%? That may have surprised you, but today in North Carolina, 60% of our current principals have less than 5 years experience in the role. Perhaps we can dig into that, among other things, with our next two guests. They are Dr. Frank Till, who's the superintendent of Cumberland County Schools, and Dr. Shirley Prince, who is the executive director of the North Carolina Association of Principals and Assistant Principals Association, or my favorite acronym, NC-PAPA. So, Shirley and Frank, thank you both for being here.
Good to be here.
Frank, I'm going to ask you first. Obviously, you have to fill these positions and find some amazing principals like Melody, who we just had on, one of your great principals. How does this low average pay that we've already mentioned, 50th out of 51 states in the District of Columbia, how does that affect your ability to keep finding the Melody Chalmers of the world? Well,
what it does is it's a distraction for coming to North Carolina, and it's a distraction from people entering the profession at all. It's gotten so bad on pay-wise that they had to change the law to allow allow administrators to not be paid less than they would be as a teacher. So that's what they've got to correct, and that's why we're 50th. When your principals with all the responsibilities pay less than a teacher, then they can't stay in the classroom and they can't survive, and so they leave the state or they don't come at all.
Right, because we're going to have some of these stats on the screen here in a couple of minutes when we go to break, but we've seen a decline of 10% in the average salary since 2008. I mentioned the 50th out of 51. So, and it takes 13 to 23 years for a principal now to move off the beginning salary schedule. Shirley, let me ask you that you represent principals and assistant principals. What are they saying about, well, one, about the pay itself and what's happened with it and where things are going?
Principals are a very hardworking group, and they rarely complain about their own salaries. They advocate for their teachers. However, a couple of years ago, the principal salary schedule was disconnected from the teacher salary schedule, which is why we are in the situation we are at this point. Prior to that, a couple of years ago, principals were paid on a schedule that increased as teachers' pay increased. We are recommending that we reconnect the principal salary schedule, and so that a principal knows that there is a clear path once he or she leaves the classroom to earn more pay for a very challenging job that has much more responsibility. And so we're advocating that we reconnect the principal salaries to the teacher salary schedule.
Right, so that in that career path you talked about, I mean, Frank, I'm assuming that's where most of your principals come from. They're teachers who may want to get into administration. Maybe they're getting into it because they want to lead, or it's a compensation issue, but they go assistant principal to principal. But you've had principals and assistant principals who make less than teachers in the last few years. Is that right?
That's correct. That's why the law was changed to allow them to not make less, and so there's not a disincentive to be an administrator. Because you talked in your last segment, they put in a lot of extra hours, a lot of stress. With social media now, there's a lot of things that occur to the principal that didn't occur when I was a principal years ago, and so it's a demanding job. Plus, they have to set the tone for the school. They have to lead, and they have to be flexible to deal with whatever might come.
Right. Now, this is particularly timely having this show this week because the North Carolina General Assembly actually has a committee meeting right now. They're actually going to be meeting again next week to talk about school-based administrator pay. You had some comments earlier on because one of the proposals that was floated was to basically make it a let's call it like a block grant, maybe a block dollar allotment, so that a superintendent like you would have to basically negotiate salaries and without any kind of salary scale. What do you think about a proposal like that?
I spoke against it for a wide variety of reasons, including the fact that in a large system like ours, it would be hard to negotiate individual contracts. So what you'd end up doing is you'd end up creating a salary schedule that you would have incentives. And I think that's where the legislature has to go. We have to have a salary schedule so you can be placed so that we can deal with the inequities, but then have a way for principals to make more money based on performance. I think if they go to that there will be a chance to achieve. The other thing I was asked about is our history of our state since I've been here is they've not been real good about keeping block grant funding at a high level. It's been a sneaky way to cut some budget.
Well, that's been one of the things with block grants. Once you say, well, now it's up to you, but then you don't really, it doesn't tie in directly to how many positions you're talking about, right?
Correct, and you end up cutting or using local dollars, or cutting positions, or taking money from someplace else to meet your basic needs. So I think it's time that we begin to fund education properly, and the funding of the principalship and the assistant principal would be part of that formula.
Right. Shirley, your members, you've always been talking about it. What do you, I mean, you mentioned linking it back together. Do you feel like having a salary schedule, is that the primary thing that we need to do, or what else?
I think we need a combination approach. I agree with Dr. Till. We need a sound salary schedule, well-performing that assures retention so that teachers come into the profession and they can see a clear path for advancement and growth. And then they need the possibility to earn extra pay for increased leadership responsibility roles, perhaps for situational kinds of things, for hard-to-staff subjects, hard-to-staff schools. And then, of course, rewarded for increasing student performance, student growth, exceeding student growth. Those are just some possibilities. So a sound, basic salary schedule layered with incentive pay, differentiated pay.
Right. Now, Dr. Till, come back to you as we start to wrap up. Things have changed. What's changed the most for you in terms of the principals and trying to fill that position, just briefly?
I think the pipeline is drying up. Everything in education is drying up. They said the millennials would be coming, the baby boomers retiring, and that would create a shortage. The baby boomers are retiring, and so there's a shortage, and the millennials are not going into administration.
Well, much work to do. Thank you both for what you do on behalf of education, and thanks for joining us. Stick around. When we come back, this week's Leadership Spotlight.